Hello and welcome to another episode of One Hale of a Conversation. I'm your host, James Hale. I'm the executive director of Mad Company and your host for this podcast. With me in the studio today is the wonderful actor, creative, editor extraordinaire, Keara Dooley.
Oh,
Hi, Keara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing well too, thank you.
Excellent. Welcome to Brick, where we do our recording. Wonderful little place.
I'm going to make you redo it.
I might record another one.
It's terrifying.
And then left it behind. We're tired.
Right, and we're back after that exciting interruption. What next season will hold? My name is James Hale. So, Keara, I was hoping we could start out how we start most podcasts, or most episodes, rather. You, on your resume, you went to USC.
Mm-hmm.
You then went to Lambda. You're now here in New York City. I wonder if you could just sort of trace, in your own words, that journey and sort of how it evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. USC I went to for undergrad. I was a theater major. It was definitely my reach school. Was very, very surprised when I actually got in. Thank you. And the cool thing about USC is that USC had about 12 different ways that you could major in acting.
Okay.
So they had a BFA program, but at the time I wasn't really interested in doing like a really hardcore BFA program. Sure. I really wanted sort of the flexibility of like the undergrad life and getting to explore a lot of different areas. So they had a BA emphasis in acting program.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. So I went to LA and I did that, and I did a semester while I was at USC at BADA, much like many of our cohort. And like many of our cohort, I very much fell in love with London and the conservatory vibe. So when I graduated from USC, I was like, I kind of would like to go back there. And so I applied for a couple of different graduate programs. Again, sort of very much like, this probably won't happen.
Right,
but we'll
see what sticks.
Yeah, we'll see what sticks. And then I very fortunately got into Lambda as well.
So cool.
Yeah.
If you don't mind my interrupting, where else did you apply?
I applied for a couple of programs at Royal Central, but it was a couple of different programs that I applied for there. But yeah, the Lambda one, I think just right off the bat, the energy just felt really, really great.
Yeah.
And the audition process felt really, really wonderful and comfortable.
Yeah.
So it was exciting when that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Did you apply for that in LA?
Yeah.
Like you did the audition in LA?
Yeah, they came to UCLA. Yeah, so I had to.
We don't talk about them.
We don't talk about them. So I had to make my way over to UCLA to do that audition. But yeah, so it was right before spring break actually.
Cool.
And I literally got on a plane to go back to see my family for spring break, and then it was on the plane ride back, like right before the plane took off, that Rodney called and was like, "Hello, it's Rodney from Lambda."
No
and
way.
I've just gotten back, and I was like, "Why are you calling
What's
me?"
happening, right? What went wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I just had to call you and tell you how terrible it was. No.
Right. You will never come here.
You will never be here. No, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So you're at Lambda with all of us. Fortunate, unfortunate. We'll get into that later. Graduated Lambda. It took you a little bit of time, much like me, to sort of get to New York.
Yeah.
I think. How did that happen? And why New York and not back to LA?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, LA, I love LA. I loved my experience in LA, but LA and I kind of have a love-hate relationship.
Sure.
I'm very much like, I like things slightly rainy and cold. I'm from Seattle. Yep. I kind of enjoy whether you can like bundle up and like where things are a bit closer knit, and LA is just very hot and spread out everywhere. So I did consider going back to LA, but in the end I just didn't feel like that was the vibe. I kind of knew immediately that I wanted to go to New York, partly because so many of our group had gone to New York. Yeah. But it was also just sort of like this idea in the back of my mind for a while.
Okay.
But yeah, it did take, well, first of all, the world was like shut down.
Right. A thing happened.
A thing occurred. And at least for me, it was just not in the cards right away.
Yeah, of course.
And also I think just dealing with all the repercussions of the world ending, I think mentally it took some time to be like, yeah, I'm ready to move across the country.
Right.
Yeah, but we got there eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it took you, it was a little less than a year, right? We graduated in October.
It was like 9 months or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's respectable. It took me like 5 and I wasn't doing anything. So,
Yes.
Just hanging out.
I was sitting in a chair.
Right. So why, you're from Seattle, West Coast makes sense, but why USC versus a UCLA or another like excellent dramatic reach school?
Yeah, absolutely. The programs that USC had, I remember when I was looking up all the, different college courses and majors that you can do, and there were definitely a couple others on my list that I was really considering. But what it kind of came down to for USC was one sort of the many different ways that you could major in acting while also exploring other things. But also they just had so many classes. Like the list for acting classes would just go on page after page after page. And they had things like Alexander, which I didn't end up taking, but that was an option that you could take. And that was an option that you could take whenever it fit in your schedule, and it wasn't just like a conservatory offering.
Right.
You could take things like voiceover or a bunch of like crazy different, you could take mask classes.
That's so cool. So you actually got down to like the coursework level. This is what my program might have. That's pretty intense.
I was really meticulous about it.
When I went to my undergrad, I think I just like threw a dart at the wall and was like, "Oh, seems good."
I mean,
I'll
that
go
works
there.
for some people. For me, I was like, I need to know everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So, and this is skipping ahead in my notes a little bit. With the the BA program that allowed you to take all these other classes, all this coursework, what other things did you end up studying at USC?
So I ended up doing, I originally was going to do a double major in classics, which is essentially Greek, Roman, history and languages, etc. The particular path that I was following the courses just didn't end up working out, so I ended up minoring it instead.
Okay.
But I've always just been like obsessed with history, and like I always say that if theater is my first love, history is my second, and I just love the older it is, the more interested.
the better.
Exactly.
Excellent.
So that was definitely the thinking behind that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that, I mean, makes sense why then Lambda and sort of this classical acting
exactly.
sphere that you went into. That's super interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Got to do a lot of courses on like myths and ancient wars and all this nerdy stuff.
Excellent,
I'm like, yes, give it to me.
Right, nerd out.
Yeah.
Everyone has their thing that they nerd out on. So I respect that. At least yours is, more interesting than most.
What's your
sure.
nerdy geek out?
Oh, that I don't know. Probably like, what is my nerd thing? I don't know, economics or something like weird,
then it's a good thing that you're
like current events or something, like I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you're at the helm then of Mad Company.
Well,
if economics is
thank you.
your special interest.
Yeah, we'll see how well that works out for all of us. So you eventually land here in New York.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't want to do LA. New York, definitely an acting city. I'm interested about the balance that you and other artists have struck between, especially our phase in our careers, early sort of establishing ourselves. How do you find balance between making money and living a life and being creative, auditioning, all those things that we're compelled to do as artists?
Yeah. I feel like, funny enough, I feel like I'm only just sort of starting to find that balance and to understand that. In all honesty, right when I moved to New York, so much of my time was taken up with figuring out how to make money.
Absolutely.
And how to survive. And I moved to New York toward like the later end of the pandemic, but the pandemic was still going on. So even finding an entry-level minimum wage type situation was a very, very difficult process, which I wasn't necessarily anticipating.
Sure.
So a lot of my time was really just figuring out, okay, how do I diversify my income and find something that's flexible enough? And in the end, I just had to sort of be like, I think we just need to focus on money to start.
I have to live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We got to live first, and then you can focus on being creative. And I think I finally sort of started to get that balance. I'm now working in person somewhere, fortunately, that is very
cool.
supportive of me being an actor. They came to Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. They took like a work trip out, and which was so sweet and very nice for me, because I was very scared that I would be like, can I take time off for a show, please?
Right. I'm doing this other
please
thing.
Don't fire me. So doing that, in addition to having some other sort of remote, flexible things that I can just sort of do from my apartment to make money, I feel like I'm just starting to now have the freedom to, like, I can go out and audition for more things and like actually devote time to that process.
Yeah, I know.
But it took time to get there.
I totally feel you. It took me, I mean, honestly, I still feel like I'm struggling sometimes to balance. Yeah. But it took me a year and a half, 2 years to be like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing now. Yeah. Even like I have a job that works, I have a life that works. Should something change, I know how to change it. So it's not this like super precarious thing that's happening. But good for you for being able to take a step back and say, I just need to focus on the living and making money, and like the art will come back.
Exactly.
I think that can be really hard for artists and creatives to be like, I'm not creating now, but that's okay. It's not not losing time.
There was definitely that like mental aspect of like, I'm not creating anything. Like, is this okay? Am I still an artist? Will I get back to there?
And so much of your self-image can get wrapped up in that.
Exactly, because when your self-image is, oh, I'm an artist, and by nature of circumstance, you have to take a step back and not do art and just sort of deal in the nitty gritty, the foundation that will later enable you to make art. Yeah, I can definitely mess with your head a little bit, but I think it's a really important part of the process that you don't hear about often when doing like, preparing to go out into the real world and doing the thing.
Leaving our programs and we're going to embark on, immediate success and immediate work in the arts, and no, you have to make money. You have to be doing this for a long time. Yeah. So now that you've found a little bit of that balance, what sorts of projects are you pursuing?
I'm finally able to do a lot more auditioning than I have been, even just at all in the past. I'm also thinking a lot about writing these days, and like, interestingly enough, visual art as well. Because I work at a museum right now, so I'm constantly surrounded by art. Sure. Which is very nice in its own way. But yeah, I have about 1 trillion different like plays or books that have been living up in my head for so long, and I'm finally getting to a point where I'm like, I should write words. I should actually write these down and work on them, because I think these are good ideas, but they've just been living up in here forever. Also, even, I mean, this is kind of, I don't know, but even just like doing the editing for like Mad Company, like even just getting into the rhythm of doing that kind of technical creative aspect consistently, I think has been really helpful and really nice as well, just to be able to be like, I have something consistently that I have to work on. Yeah,
just something, and you're accountable to something other than just, I want to do this thing, but it doesn't, like, no one cares if I do it or not. Like, I think that's such an underrated or underappreciated part of being, especially sort of a solo artist, as actors often are, is that aside from being in a show or having an audition to work on, no one cares, or no one will ever know if you are putting in the work outside of that. Yeah. And so even just a modicum of accountability in any sort of creative sphere, I know it helps me so much to know that someone else is going to look at this, someone else knows this is happening, any of that. Yeah. And especially something like editing, which you've been doing a ton of, is such a useful skill and can be either transferred into something else entirely or just useful as an actor.
Yeah, no, I think it's really difficult. I mean, I especially find this with myself personally as well, that when I'm the only person that I'm held accountable to, I can so easily just be like, oh, but I'm kind of tired today.
Right.
Oh, I'll do that tomorrow. Oh, like when such and such is in place.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like you can find yourself in this trap of always waiting for the perfect time.
Yeah.
Or when I'm a certain version of myself to
Absolutely,
do something.
Yeah.
But I kind of think what I'm realizing more recently is that it's more just about doing something and just seeing where that takes you rather than being like, oh, it has to be this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's always a million reasons to not do something, or a million reasons I can give myself to not do something. But the only reason that will make me do it is just I'm doing it right now, and that's how it's going to go.
Yeah.
So you're auditioning more, which
Yes.
is excellent. Are you looking, what sorts of projects are you finding that you are interested in auditioning for? Is this like larger scale off Broadway? Is this tiny little things in basements, the weird art, the corporate art, the classical art? What are you interested in?
Yeah, I like it. The weird art.
The weird art.
I'm kind of focusing more on plays of whatever nature that they may be. I'm really just sort of scrolling through backstage and just being like, what might I fit?
Right.
And just sort of saying, we're just going to send something off to whatever and just sort of see what happens. Throw the spaghetti noodle at the wall, I suppose. I have auditioned for some like Shakespearean type things.
Okay. Returning to your roots.
Exactly.
Good.
I feel like with like the part of this process of like returning more to auditioning more, it's a little easier, I find, to sort of start with something that I know I have a specific skill set in.
Absolutely.
That I can point to and be like, I've gotten this degree, I've done such and such many shows. Like, this is something I'm very confident in and confident advertising myself in. Especially even just like returning with Romeo and Juliet. Yeah. Like, so much of that process, I think, for me was just, hey, remember what it's like to be an actor.
Yeah, shake the rust off a little bit.
Exactly. So I have done a couple of those auditions, and we'll see where they lead.
Right. All you can do is do the audition.
Yeah.
So, speaking of your extensive training, your extensive training in the classical world, I'd like to just chat about Lambda and sort of see your perspective. So, is there a favorite role that you had at Lambda?
Ooh, at Lambda?
Yes.
I feel like I have two. One of them was just the whole process of Margaret of Anjou. I thought was just so much fun. First of all, because one of my nerdy special interests being history, and especially the Wars of the Roses.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was like, yes, finally we can.
Dig
like,
in.
This is perfect for me. And I got to do a really fun scene as Richard III, which like is just so much fun to just go way deep into something that is so completely unlike yourself. I hope.
Yeah. Well,
one hopes.
Yet to be seen.
Yeah. And then I also feel, and this relates to you as well, Flaminio in The White Devil, which is a role that we shared.
Yeah.
For similar reasons, was also just very, very fun. Someone so completely out of what you would be in your everyday life, but also Flaminio, I just found he talked like big game. Like, he's like, yeah, I'm so evil and I'm so tough and I'm gonna do all these evil things, and then at the end he was like, oh, I have feelings. Which was like, he sees his mother's crying and he's like, oh, interesting.
I'm a real boy.
Emotions, which is just a very fun transformation.
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
Play.
So I was going to talk about that later, but actually now is a great time.
Yeah.
So specifically with Flaminio, that's a role that I think for you is something very much against your type, in a really interesting way. But you also were sharing this role with me, and we are very much not the same type. Yeah. And specifically in our cut, if I'm remembering correctly, I had the first say, act,
Mm-hmm.
and then you took over for the second act.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, did the fact that you were sharing what's supposed to be a continuous role with another actor who's very different from yourself, did that affect the way you approached this role? Did you not think about it at all and just like, I'm going to do whatever I do, and whatever James does is whatever he does, and we'll see how it works? Or what were your considerations going into that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely, well, because we all did our text work together, so I would definitely like pay really close attention when like you were working through your text work, because obviously with the earlier scenes you did your text work before me.
Yeah.
And so I would take into consideration like the conclusions that you guys were drawing, and the I feel like that sort of dealt a lot with Flaminio's backstory as well. So I definitely took some of that on board, and I definitely deviated a little bit, because there obviously whenever you're sharing a role with someone, there comes a point where you just have to be like, and now I'll just do whatever I do, and we'll see there. But definitely the work that you guys were doing definitely fed into that and kind of established this foundation, I think, upon which I could like sprinkle, and I think I observed this as well, or like, because I dealt a lot more with Flaminio being like, emotions.
Right. Yeah. You had the sort of not reversal. What's the word? The changing character.
Yeah.
Versus I was doing the establishing character and establishing the world. Do you find that, or did you find, I guess, that in hearing all of this text work on the character that you would be playing, that you had to like fight against just like taking everything that we were saying, that we being myself and Jeremy, our director, were saying, and like accepting that to be true? Did you ever want to push back and say, later I think something different, so we should establish that?
I don't think there was ever anything where I was like, I really intensely disagree.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah. Everything that you guys worked through, if I'm remembering correctly, it all made sense. I think for me it was just a lot of finding out, okay, so now where does the softness come in, if that makes sense? Because I had to get to a place where there is both the acknowledgement of, I have feelings, and actually I'm like sad that my mom is sad and I've killed my brother and maybe I shouldn't have done that. But then in the next scene I have to go be like, and now I'm going to kill my sister too.
What a weird character.
Exactly. Fascinating character. So yeah, I think a lot of it for me was just figuring out, how do I kind of make him a little more unhinged in a way.
Sure.
Because the Flaminio in the first act is very much like, I know what I'm doing.
Right.
I have everything under control.
Right. The provocateur. Devious.
I have all these connections.
Right. The Iago character.
Yeah.
Almost.
So a lot of my work was figuring out, okay, how does it all go horribly wrong? And how do I just like completely fall apart as a human?
When shit hits the fan, what does Flaminio do?
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, yeah, that performance production was all sorts of crazy because of the onset of COVID and everything, but I think we pulled through.
I think we did too.
Funnily enough, Margaret of Anjou, I think everyone I've talked to about it says that might be like the seminal moment for them at Lambda, which is insane because it was 2.5 months into our training. Like, we hadn't even been there that long, but everyone looks back at this project and just thinks, what an incredible time. Either the character I was playing or working with Rodney or something. But there was something magical about that time for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It was like December. We were like just wrapping up our first semester. We were like, wow, we're learning so many things. Right. I also think until we got to the very end of our program, it was like the most complete thing we accomplished.
Oh, sure.
And it had the most like feeling of an actual show. Like the Spanish plays that we did, it wasn't that they were in like any different spaces, like they were in smaller spaces, but they were still in those like concrete Lambda rooms.
The bunkers.
Exactly. But I think on Margaret of Anjou there was this vision of like, we are actually going to create a different space for the audience, which was like the rest of us and some of our teachers. to actually go to, and the vision was really strong with
Right.
that project. We're like, we're gonna do candles, and we leaned in.
There's live fire everywhere.
Live fire everywhere. Absolutely amazing that
Yeah.
Lambda didn't burn down.
Yeah, we survived.
We were running around with those candles. We were doing war scenes
Yes, we
with
were.
those
I
candles.
was dragging poor Lucy through hot wax.
Yes.
Not necessarily on purpose, but so it went.
It added to the character.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yes, it's real.
exactly.
Okay. So Flaminio, Richard III. Is there a favorite class that you remember, or not necessarily favorite, but maybe most useful? Or like what class do you look back on with the most appreciation?
I feel like off the top of my head, a lot of the any of the work that was very rooted in like the imagination, or like utilizing your imagination in order to facilitate changes in your breath or in your body, or so like a lot of the work that we did with Robert, I would say sort of fits in that, and like with Heriberto as well, some of like the elements work a lot, but now I'm just thinking of every class.
Right, yeah, just everything.
And I'm like, wow, everything was so impactful. But yes, anything that kind of took you out of yourself. Like there was this one, I think this was in Robert's class, there was this one exercise that we did where like you imagined a butterfly landing on your fingertip, and then you let the butterfly go, and then you could breathe so easily.
Right.
And for me, like, I don't know if anyone else had the same experience, but for me, I was like, I can breathe so easily. And he was like, use the ah. And I was like, I feel it. I understand. It was one of those like Lambda lightning bolt,
Absolutely,
light
yeah.
bulb moments. Or whenever we would figure out who different like movie characters, like what efforts they were in Laban.
Oh, the Laban, sure.
That was, I always found that to be very
So
interesting.
you appreciated like the psychophysical sort of connection.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, that's actually probably what I learned the most
Yeah.
at Lambda, was that there's, when we talked about it, like figure of 8, inner and outer, that definitely was something that was revelatory for me. You know, not only can it come from the inside and affect the outside, but what is outside can also come in, and allowing it to work both ways felt beautiful and natural, and I had never thought about acting in that way.
It makes it so much easier in a way to think of it like that.
Right.
Which anything that can make it easier.
Right, is only a good thing.
Exactly.
So in that vein, we've been out of Lambda now for almost 3 years, which is crazy to me. I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that that we learned or were exposed to at Lambda that you still feel like you heavily lean on, either in your own creative practice or just in life today. What's sort of stuck with you?
Yeah. I think I think to an extent the what we were talking about earlier, the just do art.
Sure.
And whatever it is, even if it's, not up to your standards, just do it, and the process of doing that is the important thing. I think also just the idea of approaching not even just an audition, but like anything with confidence, and the preparation that you do in advance is what gives you that confidence.
Okay.
Like doing that that background work, or knowing everything you're saying, knowing why you're saying what you're saying in that moment, and then just being able to have the freedom when you're doing the thing to be like, okay, I know what I'm saying, I know what my goal is, I know this character, now I can just play and just have fun. I do also think I feel like I just saw on like Instagram the other day, it was Rodney saying, if you can do Shakespeare, or if you can do, the classics, you can do everything. And I was like, yes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, because if you've done like, wow, I'm a king, and I'm gonna go to hell or I'm gonna
Right.
lose my kingdom, or all my family's going to die, or I've killed my brother. Like, if you've done that major thing, then you can do a contemporary
Right.
scene.
Anything else? Yeah.
Exactly.
I had short anecdote from me real
Yeah.
quick. There was a moment during Margaret of Anjou that I think about all the time. We were doing the scene where the queens bring the princes or go visit the Tower of London, try and visit the princes on the eve of them actually being executed. But they think they're going to be crowned, and they're not allowed into the castle. They're not allowed into the fort. They're stopped at the gate. And we were doing the scene, and I mean, I don't know the text anymore, but one of the actresses doing the scene, Michelle, like did it, and I thought did it well, was begging, she was saying to the fort, like, stones weep for me or something, something like that, or protect my children.
Mm-hmm.
Stones protect my children. She did it, and it was lovely, and Rodney basically said, stop. We just want to explain what's happening. Your children are on the other side of that wall. You know they are going to be killed at this point because you have figured it out. You can't get in. So the only thing you can do to protect your children is to beg these inanimate stones to come to life to protect your children. Now go. It's like, God damn it, Rodney.
There was an extent of like leaning into the metaphor and like doing exactly like don't just say beg the stones. You beg the stones.
You do it, right. And it's the absolute most of human experience. Like, what an insane thing for a real person to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're up on stage and this is a real world that we're creating, that person is actually doing that. So if you can nail that, anything else is possible for sure. I mean, any modern drama of, sometimes life and death, sometimes family, sometimes self-fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's as real and alive as the only thing I can do is beg for these stones to somehow become alive, you can handle that.
Yeah.
Which I think is incredible.
I once had an acting teacher say to our class, if you ever get a line, and this was in a contemporary class,
Mm-hmm.
if you ever get a line that is just so like saccharine or so like cringy or just so fluffy, and you're like, why would I say this line? You have to think of it in the sense that you say this thought this way because it is the only way you can say it. So if you're using like the most flowery words or like the weirdest metaphor, it has to be because that is the only way that you can possibly express it.
Right. You have to lean in. It has to be,
You can't apologize for the metaphor. You have to let it live within you.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, some of the things, right. I'm getting tingles in here, guys. You can't see this, but so I'm curious, at Lambda, we heard about this, or at least I remember hearing about this occasionally, that a lot of the things we were learning we wouldn't understand yet. And it would take, over the course of a career, it would take years, decades sometimes for us to be like, oh, I understand this thing now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, has anything in the last 3 years like clicked for you that didn't while we were at Lambda? Any new secret knowledge?
Secret knowledge that is just absorbed. Yeah, we would hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I remember, I think was it Judith who would describe it as, you are going to become what was it? Oh no, now I'm forgetting. The competency thing.
Right. It was unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent, consciously competent, and then unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
Right. The levels of learning.
Exactly. And she was like, you are going to spend most of this entire experience being consciously incompetent.
Right.
And it was pretty early on in our Lambda journey. We were like, no.
Damn it. Right. That sucks.
We're like, but I want to know things. And I honestly feel like most of the time I still live there.
Sure.
But I do feel like some of the I feel like a lot of these things are going to be years-long processes. I think one of the things that maybe I feel like I understand a little better now. I'm trying to go through every class in my head.
Right. The totality of the year we spent there.
Exactly.
Distill it right now.
Yeah. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, that's fine. Know. Like, it's only been a few years. Like,
exactly.
There's not necessarily a bunch of secret knowledge that you should have unlocked.
I'm gonna remember something the second I leave here.
Excellent. We'll splice it in later.
Yes.
Very cool. So leaving Lambda slightly behind, I'm going to look at your resume here right in front of us. Very impressive. Okay. Lots and lots of classical.
Yes.
Including at USC. I see Bada, I see Lambda. And we've talked about this a little bit, your appreciation for classics and history. So I'm assuming that this classical, especially like sort of Shakespearean bent, is intentional on your resume. This is not something that happened by accident and you happen to fall into all these classical programs and all these classical shows.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think like I definitely do go out for Shakespeare things or classical things because I love them. I love working on them. I love going into these worlds that was written by someone 500 or 1,000 years ago. And I'm like, and I'm saying these words. I think that's the coolest thing. And you're like begging to gods and you're, plotting things. It's so much fun. But I also think because I love it, in a way that does sort of make you fall into it a little more. Like sure. I certainly auditioned for contemporary things while I was at USC. Sometimes I would get offers for contemporary things and sometimes I wasn't. At USC, they have like their main stage shows, which are about like, depending on the program you're in, it can be like 5, 10 or so shows that you can audition for in a season.
Okay.
But there are a lot of acting students there and like that many shows comparatively. Sure. So they have a really strong independent student theater tradition.
Okay.
They're in a lot of independent student theater companies. And so I found myself doing a lot of auditions for those types of shows mostly, which are what a lot of these are. And right when I got back from Bada, actually, was when I started getting really involved in classical shows at USC. And so because that sort of became not what I was like known for, but it was clear what my strengths were.
Sure.
Then it became like, if it's between such and such contemporary play or like such and such classical play, I just kind of felt like I fit more in that classical play world, and I got more offers for those. So sort of a it was kind of a self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean that makes sense. I feel like that happens to, professional actors all over the place. You're good at something, so you do it a lot, and then that's the only thing you do.
Yeah.
Not that that's the only thing you've done, but
it's a lot of what I've
looking.
done.
Yeah, I mean, looking at all these credits, a significant portion of them are Shakespearean, which is great.
Yeah.
I also noticed there's a fun thing here. If we flip the page to page 2, your number one special skill is crochet.
Well, first of all, this is alphabetically organized.
I know, but it's still, yes.
It does look
it's
like
still number one.
It does look like it has a prominent place. Listen, I wouldn't say that I am the greatest crocheter in the world.
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't say that. In fact, if anything, that was a bit more of like a pandemic child, like me sitting in my chair doing like, what can I do? I can crochet. Like we had like crochet needles around the house. I wouldn't say I could make anything like super elaborate, but I can do like a mean baby blanket.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Are there a lot of baby blankets that you've finished and are sending out to all the new babies in the world?
I should. I should.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I have some yarn. I could do it.
A yarn and a baby.
And a baby. Oh, that's so exciting. That made my heart so happy.
That was great. Yes.
Yeah, I can do like a nice little granny square for you. It's not like I don't expect that to do great things for me. But if anything, like if they need a random gremlin in the background doing some crochet, I can absolutely. They know I can fill that.
That's
role.
right.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the world, there's performance art that requires live
Yes.
crochet.
Yes.
And they're just looking for you.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this podcast, it's Keara Dooley.
Thank you.
For your project.
Yeah. I love seeing what people put on their special skills on their resume. I have a friend from undergrad who can burp on command on her resume, and she gets asked about it.
I mean,
all the time.
Honestly, if any non-actors are listening, that sounds like something that is actually very useful for an actor,
right?
Because the one scene that requires you to burp
exactly
every time,
you know that they're just looking for that one person,
right?
Yeah,
right. Otherwise, that's a sound effect, and it just doesn't hit the same.
No,
doesn't land.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I completely agree. Especially on Actors Access, there's just like buttons you click. I'm like, I've done these things once in my life, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm reasonably confident that I could dive on command.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I could learn this in a couple of weeks.
Right.
What's your most reach? The one where you're like, I don't have a lot of experience. I don't actually know if I could do this right. But I could learn, I'm sure.
Actually, probably skiing. Like specifically downhill. Like,
what, is there uphill skiing?
No, like cross country.
Oh, okay.
So like I grew up in Vermont, so I can snowboard, I can ski. I can now, because I'm an old man with a broken body, I can cross country ski.
Okay.
So like my skiing, if you put me on skis, I wouldn't necessarily fall over. But I wouldn't look good doing it. So
I wouldn't fall over.
Yeah,
I could stay upright for the most part.
For most of the mountain, I would be upright, but it's not gonna look good. So, actually, I feel like there's a lot of that on my resume. There's a lot of like, I've done this before. Mm-hmm. I can do it, but if you're looking for it to look good on TV, it's probably not me.
Yeah,
we'll want my double to get in.
Exactly. I can't say any of my baby blankets look brilliant, but.
Right.
But they exist.
But as long as you look good doing it, I think that's more important.
There we go. Exactly.
Perfect. Great. Yeah. So I have some sort of extra time questions here that we'll just burn through, and we'll see what's going on. So firstly, any dream roles you have? If you could do any role ever in any place, which ones would you pick?
This is more like a dream project.
Sure.
I just feel like I need to be on a period drama at some point in my life. I just need to like wear a big fluffy dress.
Okay.
And like run down the castle corridor.
Sure.
I don't know what role that would be, but I mean, any role that will let me do that.
Seems like there's plenty of them.
I feel like there's a market. I would love to do, because Lady Macbeth was one of those that like the role was split between a couple of people.
Sure.
It would be very fun to do Lady Macbeth's whole journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll say that.
Okay. All right. Good answer.
Thank you. I
tried. Next question. What? I'm trying to rephrase this in my head. Why acting and art and theater? What sort of drew you into that world?
At a certain point, there just couldn't be anything else.
Interesting. Okay.
I feel when I was a child,
when I was a baby.
Yes. I was crazy. I would watch movies and TV shows, and I would immediately like internalize them and memorize them, and then I would do them by myself. And my family had no idea what to do with me. There are like those old like VHS videos of like me doing the entire dream sequence from Fiddler on the Roof by myself. Like,
that's kind of
I'm like
that's kind
5.
of scary.
Yeah.
It's like weird and dark.
It is weird and dark. I do love some weird and dark.
That's my wheelhouse.
Yeah. But no, so I think my family kind of immediately was like, let's put her in theater. And I saw the school plays at my middle school,
Sure.
and I just love seeing them. They seem so magical to me. So I started doing those when I was old enough. And then in high school, I was like, well, I need to do theater. And then it was like, well, could do this. Like,
this is a job.
This is a job. Like, you could do this. And you could spend every day studying this and learning about this and just performing. And when you first have that thought, I feel like it's kind of like, oh, no, like, that's not real.
Right.
But the more time went on, the more it was just like, well, I could theoretically do something else. Would it make me as happy or fulfilled? And at a certain point, it was just like, probably not. If I end up doing something else later down the line, then that's fine. But I think I will hate myself forever if I don't,
if you don't give it a shot.
Try.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of, at least from the outside as actors, a lot of the sort of negative feedback we get over, oh, you want to be an actor, is the percentage of people who make a full-time living and frankly live really well doing this is minuscule.
Yeah.
Minuscule. But there is a whole industry of people who either have multiple jobs within the industry. They are writers, they're producers, they're directors, they're actors, they're technical people.
Yeah.
Or they dabble. Oh, microphone hit. Or they dabble while, having a second career, or they're high quality amateurs. Like, if this is something that people are passionate about, and especially young people, like, it is entirely possible to do this for your entire life. There is no mandatory retirement age for creatives. It might not be, and frankly probably won't be, fame and fortune and turning down movie roles because you're so in demand. Might be.
Yeah.
But if this is what you want to do, you can do it.
Yeah.
Which gives me a lot of hope when I'm sitting and not doing it, that, I will do it again someday. Maybe I'll never be rich. Maybe I'll never be on a network TV show or on Broadway, but I can perform and be on stage for the rest of my life if that's what I want.
Yeah. And there is that sort of connection of, this is when I feel most like me.
Absolutely.
When I feel most like myself. Which, again, might not be fame, fortune, turning down movie roles, but nonetheless is a pretty significant aspect of yourself.
Absolutely.
And your health and happiness and all that whatnot.
So you were a theater kid through and through.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up.
And it was funny because I definitely was like, oh, I don't know. And I think my family in the back of their minds was always like, start preparing. Like, she's going to go to drama school. I think they 100% knew I was going to drama school and pursuing this way before I could admit it to myself that that's what I wanted in life.
That's fair. I mean, sometimes family just knows that.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, I wonder if you could chart out, or frankly just make one up here on the spot, either a like personal and or professional 5 to 10 year plan. Like, where would you like, and this can be entirely fanciful.
Yeah.
There's no one here to judge.
That's true.
What would you like the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever to look like?
Yeah. For the next 5 years, I would love to just I feel like I would love to just do anything I want without restraining myself or without imposing any self-judgment on it. Like, if in 10 years I've like written some books or some plays and, done however many plays or I don't know, TV shows or whatever, I don't know. As long as I have put myself forward for anything that I want, essentially, without thinking, oh, I don't know if I would be the best for that, or I don't know if my skills are up to par with that, or like, oh, I've never done something like that before.
Right.
Then I think I will be happy with that.
Okay. So it's more about pursuit of the dream and putting yourself out there than it is about, in the next 5 years, I'd like to be I'd like to be off Broadway
Yeah.
twice. I'd like to be
Yeah.
whatever.
In the next 10 years, I would love to be a movie star.
Right. I'm waiting for the millions to come
Exactly.
in. Yep.
Yeah, we just talked about how that's not important. No, it's important. I will make the millions. I will turn down the movie roles.
That's right.
No.
Accept nothing less, kids.
Exactly. I think as long as I just sort of allow myself to truly pursue and to truly reach for the stars or whatever, then I think that I won't have any regrets.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I wish that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you have lived and trained in sort of the three big, at least English-speaking creative cities in the world.
True.
L.A., London, New York City. I'm wondering, do you have a favorite?
Oh,
Is there
London.
London? Yeah, okay.
Oh, take me back to London. There
was
we
quick.
go.
All right.
There we go. 10-year plan.
Back to
Back
right.
to London. The thing about London, I feel, at least for me, partly because of the theater, partly because of the history, it is one of those places where I just felt like, this is the most true version of me. Also, I think, kind of like how we were discussing earlier, there, at least in the States, and I think, slightly less so in New York, but still present, is very much like when you tell someone that you're an actor or that you're pursuing an acting career, they're like, oh, great.
Good
but
for you.
What do you do? But for money. Like, it's very much like, oh, yeah, but you're not in a Marvel movie or,
Right.
Something like that.
Right. You don't make your living as an actor.
Exactly.
Sure.
Whereas I felt like in London, if someone was like, oh, what are you studying? And I'd be like, theater, I'm going to be an actor. They'd be like, oh, that's great. We love that. Like, it was very much more, it felt more respected, regardless of what level that you were at. So yeah, I feel like even just for that supportive attitude alone, but also I just love London. London's pretty cool.
London is wonderful.
Yeah, I do love New York though as well, and I
also great.
And I have love for LA.
And love somewhere in me exists for LA.
Exists for LA.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It feels like I think particularly the English have a very different relationship with, in particular, like performance art than we do here in the States. And I mean, talking about a country as diverse as England and then a country as huge and diverse as the United States is slightly different things.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I agree. It does feel like there's some sort of connection there, and it might be just the fact that London sort of is the cultural center of at least England, if not the entire UK, whereas New York is just one of them.
True.
We have so many other cities, cultural centers. But okay, so you're London, and in your 10-year plan, you're heading back.
In my 10-year plan, I'm going back there. I don't know. I'll have a little townhouse. There we go. In my 10-year plan, I'll have a little townhouse.
Yes, you can just jet everywhere.
Exactly.
On and off the West End.
Yep. Yeah.
Living the dream.
They need me to come on.
Yes.
If I must.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Great. So this is something that I've asked everyone who's been on the show so far. I'm very curious about this for you.
Oh.
If you were not an actor and or creative, what would you be?
If you had asked me when I was in middle school, I would say veterinarian. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian for the longest time.
Okay.
But absolutely not anymore. Probably a professor or an archaeologist or something.
Classics again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Going back to
back to your roots.
Yeah, I feel like I need to do something in my life that I am passionate about.
That's something you need to know about yourself.
Exactly.
And I'm very glad that we got to know a little bit more about you.
Yay.
Keara Dooley.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. This was one hail of a conversation. We were speaking with the wonderful Keara Dooley. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.